A former state lawmaker facing graphic charges representing himself. New developments in the legal saga swirling around Nancy Mace. And last but not least, a return to the days of our Congressman saga. I'm Will Folks, the owner and founding editor of FITSNews. Welcome to another edition of your Week in Review. Let's dive in. So if you followed FITSNews for any amount of time, you know that we have pushed for reforms, substantive reforms across South Carolina state government, trying to fix the way we tax, the way we spend, the way we adjudicate criminal and civil cases in our badly broken justice system. Now, along the way, we've taken it upon ourselves to call out those in power who have failed on those fronts and those who have tried to fix the problem. And in many cases, folks in the South Carolina Freedom Caucus have been part of the solutions. We've credited them. In fact, we've credited them to the extent that some folks on the other side of those debates have said we were too much in the pocket of the Freedom Caucus or too supportive of their agenda. Well, you can't question our coverage on the former leader of the Freedom Caucus, R.J. May, because from the very beginning of the story that now has totally enveloped him, FITSNews has led the coverage. Every significant development tied to the saga of R.J. May has been broken by our media outlet, beginning back in August of last year with a raid on his West Columbia, South Carolina home by federal and state agents. Now, at the time, we weren't entirely sure what was happening during that raid, but we have since learned, again, through exclusive reporting by our media outlet, exactly what was at stake. And to say it was a worst-case scenario would be putting it mildly. Now, we've already covered the horrifically graphic allegations against R.J. May that have been spelled out in court documents in open court and federal court here in Columbia, South Carolina. But as this saga has unfolded, and as R.J. May now facing 10 counts of distributing hundreds of files of horrific child sex abuse material, also known as child porn, as that saga unfolds in the courtroom, we have been following those developments, and I'm joined by our Andy Fancher. Now, Andy, you have exclusively reported on some of the major developments in this case, including the arrest of R.J. May back in June, just a day before that 10-count federal indictment dropped. You've also been tracking his prosecution step by step as it unfolds, and you and I this week got tipped off. A little information came our way about a court hearing that had been requested by R.J. May in his case, which is apparently headed to trial in October of this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we got this tip about an attorney status hearing. We checked on the federal side, Fed saying, not us, nothing changing on our side. That was tied to R.J. May's representation. Now, Andy, for those who haven't been tracking this case, walk us through how RJ's representation over this saga has evolved. He had private counsel, then a public defender, and what the hell happened this week?
Right. In fact, when we co-authored that report noting that he was about to appear in federal court, and we had hinted to what might be happening, I had heard from folks who were in disbelief as to what we were hearing. They said, surely not. RJ is going to represent himself in federal court. Obviously, we have come a long way from his first detention hearing, which was June 12th, the day after we exclusively reported on his federal arrest. He was represented at that time by a criminal defense attorney, Dwayne Phillips, who was short-lived. From there, we actually obtained, exclusively some communication within the Edgefield County Detention Center of him shopping around for multiple attorneys. He was referring to fellow Freedom Caucus member, civil attorney Ryan McCabe, on some of the next steps, some folks that he should potentially speak to. One of those attorneys that he, again, was looking at retaining briefly was Amy Zimmerchak.
Cousin Eddie's lawyer from the Murdoch side.
Cousin Eddie's lawyer, absolutely. Another name that came up in that vortex, if you want to call it, was Bill Nettles, of all people.
Wow. Former U.S. attorney.
Yes, now in the private practice, with quite a heavy representation bill, at least from what we could see. But ultimately, he settled on a federal public defender after claiming that he had little to no money to his name, with a singular asset being a vehicle worth about $30,000. But now, come this week, he appeared in federal court alongside his federal public defender, and an attorney to that public defender as well, with this attempt for a hybrid counsel. So what RJ had motioned for, again, a hybrid counsel, which is not a very common thing. In fact, I didn't know what it was at the time, where he proposed essentially representing himself, but if the crap hit the fan, he could fall back on the federal public defenders. The federal judge, of course, denied that motion, to which he said, all right, I'm going to represent myself. And
Which
that's where
was
we're at.
Shocking. But let me ask you this. Obviously, the headline this week was RJ May represents himself, and everyone's looking at the absolutely insurmountable odds associated with that kind of arrangement. I mean, pro
Right.
se defendants going up against the federal government in an evidence-based case like this. But Andy, your reporting took this in a different direction because I think you focused on what was the real news here, which was the arguments that RJ May is planning to make in that capacity. Walk us through a little bit about this big motion that RJ May is planning and what you've been able to glean from the records we've been able to FOIA.
Sure. So in addition to learning new details about what the feds have, which would include, but is not limited to, we learned in open court on Thursday, a total of 7 federal search warrants executed in relation to their case against RJ, including that residential search warrant, which is going to come into play in just a moment. We learned additionally about the 3 state search warrants that were executed by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department. We furthermore learned that they are planning to call 8 witnesses to the stand in the trial that is scheduled for just next month. And prosecutors noted that some of those testimonies are expected to be lengthy. Now, as for what RJ noted in open court, which we have additional context to, is in the final stages of drafting a motion to suppress, specifically the federal search warrant executed at his property that we exclusively reported on August 5th, I believe. Is that right? As we have
Of
reported,
last year.
Correct, of last year. And as we have reported extensively, approximately 30 devices were pulled from that home. This was germane to a tip that the feds ultimately received that somebody from his property was disseminating child pornography. So, search warrant executed, approximately 30 devices seized. What I have emphasized over and over again is that across all these devices, which RJ noted in his prison communication encompass some 20 years of data.
They were all clean.
They were all clean.
Yeah.
No evidence of child sex abuse material. But nonetheless, he is motioning to suppress this specific warrant. And
do we have any idea why? I mean, is there any rhyme or reason to this?
I wish I could say anything from my end would be suspicion.
Yeah.
As we have gleaned from, again, his jailhouse communication through the Edgefield County Detention Center, he has emphasized that nothing was pulled from these devices. The most damning thing, from my understanding, from where I sit, is that from his cell phone, the feds deduced that a messenger app was at one time on his cell phone. That's what they got.
That's what they got.
But as it relates to this motion to suppress, again, it's something that has been in discussion from RJ's end since the week after his arrest, at least from what we could pull from Freedom of Information Act requests. So, for instance, the Wednesday after his indictment, he's talking about I should have a skeleton of a suppression motion and motion to revoke detention by next week. Well, we know how the detention revocation went, but that conversation evolves, it progresses. In addition to this proposal of his to draft a motion to suppress, we also have emphasis specifically from Ryan McCabe on the importance of an expert witness. In fact, in Ryan's own words, don't let me misquote him, he notes, an expert witness will be imperative expert. Witness may turn out to be more important than the lawyer. And, if you think about it, whether you get Johnny Cochran up there or Saul Goodman, your defense is pretty limited.
Yeah.
But as for what an expert witness can do, I mean, I think any attorney would agree that an expert witness is very important. So this discussion about the expert witness preceded RJ ultimately settling on a federal public defender, which could suggest that perhaps he's setting aside some coin for
the
that.
witness, not the lawyer.
Correct. Because again, a lawyer's defense, their hands are tied in a situation like this.
A bad lawyer with a good expert witness is better than a good lawyer with a bad expert witness, is what you're saying.
Sure, perhaps what one could deduce from looking at these communications. In fact, they discussed prices associated with expert witnesses. Let's see. It varied anywhere from $15,000 to a number that Ryan McCabe grabbed from Nettles, $100,000.
Wow.
Which, RJ openly admits he does not have that kind of money.
Yeah.
But we nonetheless see continued discussion of this motion to suppress. He brought up this motion to suppress with Amy Zimmercheck. It appears as though that skeleton draft was forwarded to her. He asked her thoughts. It doesn't appear as though she ever gave them. And now, after, according to his own admission, reaching an impasse with the federal public defenders he has now, he's representing himself.
Do we have any idea, Andy, when this skeleton motion, which we presume will be fleshed out and presented, do we have any idea when RJ May plans to argue this motion before Judge Cameron Curry?
Sure. As a matter of fact, there was a brief discussion during Thursday's hearing, which lasted less than an hour, mind you. It started at 10, and by 10:55, I had made it out of the courtroom to call you. That was exactly when I placed that call. So a lot of very serious and irreversible decisions were made in a very short amount of time. And during that short amount of time, they did discuss perhaps extending the deadline for him filing this motion to suppress. But RJ ultimately testified that if he has access to the information that he needed that day, he could get it turned by this coming week. And as it stands now, he is expected to be transported to the Matthew J. Perry Courthouse in Columbia, where he will hand deliver this motion to suppress.
Wow. And at that point, I guess it's up to the judge whether or not to schedule arguments on it, at which point RJ would make his debut as his own attorney.
And speaking on his debut as his own attorney, because as we have mentioned, he entered a prolonged silence after his home was raided by federal authorities last year. In open court, the most we've really heard him say over these past couple of months is "Yes, Your Honor," and "No, Your Honor." And folks might disagree with me on this, but again, just from where I was sitting in court, it almost felt like I was watching the old RJ. He was a lot more talkative than usual. This guy, former firebrand, love him or hate him, he was a fighter. Yeah. And I can see, or at least I felt I saw some of that step coming back. Now, whether or not he has a fighting chance in hell in federal court, if you've ever represented yourself on a traffic ticket in Kershaw County Traffic Court, it's challenging. Better yet, at the federal level. And I was surprised by the lack of statistics on prosay defendants in federal court. But from what I could gather, from what at best are just snapshot statistics from universities out of Ohio or law offices out of Washington, it's about a 95% failure rate.
Yeah. It's
if you're a criminal defendant. Civil defendant, it's not much better either.
Yeah.
So to say it's an uphill battle is a magnificent understatement.
You also noted, Andy, I thought this was interesting. You were at that first court hearing where R.J. May's wife, Beth May, was in attendance at that hearing, the initial one, but she was not present at this hearing, was she?
There was no semblance of any family in attendance during this one, which, if this were a Grand Theft Auto case or a drug case, that's different. But what message that sends that your wife, the mother of your two minor children, is not in attendance when you make this irreversible, massive decision, that depending on how you look at it, could say something.
Well, Andy, we're going to count on you later this month when this motion gets argued to be back at the Matthew J. Perry Federal Courthouse to let us know how this plays out. Obviously, a huge roll of the dice by R.J. May, and it's funny. We've been talking about it a little bit. We've had some conversations with other folks in the office, with folks that are outside the office. And remember, from the very beginning, R.J. May kept saying it's the deep state. It's the deep state. That's what his supporters were telling us was coming from his lips in the aftermath of this raid and the silence that ensued. He said nothing publicly, but what we were hearing, the whispers were it's the deep state. I guess we're going to find out whether or not he's got any cards to back up that assertion or some other defense he might offer. But Andy, you've done amazing work on this, man. Your thoughts on his pushback?
Sure. I just wanted to add one thing about our sources because we have independent sources who sometimes say the exact same thing. I just wanted to let the record reflect from my end. I never heard any whisper about deep state. I was aware of fellow members of the South Carolina General Assembly speaking with him, but most of those conversations were respectfully off the record. But I personally never heard any whispers about deep state, as we have heard from at least Dwayne Phillips in his initial detention hearing where he was denied bond. The argument was that this was a political attack.
Yeah.
Now, that argument is something that, at least from what I did, is mainstream media is so quick to dismiss. But if we're going to weigh out all the options here, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It would be something uber sophisticated to pull off, but again, not impossible. By no means am I defending the charges against this man.
Yeah.
If he's innocent, this is a Greek tragedy, and if he's guilty, no amount of time would constitute as a justifiable punishment. But this guy is a former political consultant who now is involved in probably the most, or no, I'm not probably. I mean, this is going to be the most important representation of his life. It's no longer up to a private attorney or court-appointed federal public defenders. Freedom or life behind bars is now in the hands of R.J. May.
Andy, amazing work. And now for the political implications of this, we're going to bring in our Dylan Nolan. All right, so Dylan, you listened to the report from Andy Fancher.
That's a tough act to follow. He did a great job.
I mean, he did, but looking at what he presented, those documents, the court proceedings, what's your first reaction? We're going to get into the politics of this, but having followed this criminal case, what's your first reaction to RJ's decision and that forthcoming motion?
I mean, I've been around the block for long enough to know that anytime you hear prosay, things are going off the rails. That usually, just given the complexity of the rules of criminal procedure, this is a pretty crazy decision for a defendant to make.
Yeah, and as Andy said, it's one that you make this decision, you're committed. I mean, it's not something you can walk back. Obviously, at some point, were he to get resources for counsel, but as Andy hinted, it could be he's trying to apply those resources where he feels they're going to do him more good with a jury.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the assistance of counsel he received at his first hearing. That didn't look like it was going too well either. So I'm not trying to say that, RJ has completely shot himself in the foot here. I don't think he's turning over, $1 million legal representation to represent himself in court. I think he's between a rock and a hard place here. Yeah. But yeah, you hear prosay, and that certainly sends your eyebrows up.
So we're going to talk about the political fallout here in just a minute, and it is significant, particularly as we look at it in the context of some upcoming special elections here in South Carolina, and then down the road as we look at it in the context of a pivotal 2026 primary year in the Republican primary here in South Carolina. But before we get into all of that, Dylan, I want to ask you about something that Andy and I were kind of hinting at toward the end of that segment. From the beginning of this process, I don't think there's ever really been any doubt about the credibility of the allegations against R.J. May. They don't bring indictments like this without solid evidence. They don't level these kind of charges lightly, obviously. And obviously the evidence was overwhelming for them to issue those charges. But that sink the deep state narrative or blast the deep state narrative. And certainly the feds have made one mistake featuring that Facebook photo that they claimed was RJ that wasn't. It was a stock image. So the feds have not been perfect on this, obviously. But can you fathom a situation where this was a setup? Can you fathom a situation where RJ goes into court representing himself and somehow pulls a rabbit out of the hat and exposes this whole thing as an elaborate setup?
Oh, I think you could be a fool to not fathom this. If you look at a jury trial, even if you're talking about you got lawyers on sitting at both tables, jury trial is always going to have that element of you could have one person on that jury who is going to think something that the rest of the jurors don't think. So yes, anytime you're taking it to a jury trial, even if you are dead to rights as a defendant,
Yeah.
that is one of the prime reasons people don't take plea deals. There is that chance that you will walk.
Yeah. Now, the fact that these are federal charges being brought again by federal prosecutors, being investigated by predominantly federal agents, to me, that takes a little bit of the luster off of the conspiracy theories, about the setup theories, because the federal government really doesn't have an incentive to set R.J. May up. To me, it doesn't seem like that's the sort of thing that there would be any benefit to the feds to do that. Now, if we look at the state level, and certainly as we talk about the state justice system here in South Carolina, folks who follow FITSNews know whether investigators, prosecutors, or judges, we got a lot of problems with the integrity of the system here. So that would be something, if it were purely a state-driven prosecution, I could see maybe there's a little argument that could be made there. I mean, Dylan, but
I mean, we saw plenty of politicized, bogus criminal charges during Joe Biden's administration pursued against President Trump and his political allies. That being said, this investigation and criminal charges have spanned now both Joe Biden's administration and Donald Trump's administration, which is something that I believe adds a lot of credibility to this case for folks who might think that it was a political witch hunt.
And also, it didn't start with R.J. May. They didn't know who they were looking at, according to the federal pleadings that we've seen. This was something, hey, we found this. It was a tip that came through from an app.
Now, if you're wearing a tinfoil hat, are you going to take them at their word on that?
Well, I like to wear a tinfoil hat, and I'm not taking them at their word. I want to see them prove it in court, as I'm sure you do. But the conspiracy theories that have been pushed regarding this, a lot of folks believe R.J. May has been set up. We have never advanced that narrative at FITSNews because there's nothing at this point to suggest that he has been set up. Maybe he will show something to that effect in his representation. But turning, though, to the political fallout, and this is why the setup theory, to the extent that it's been offered, I think is resonating with some people, because this has literally turned the ship. It's turned the debate in South Carolina. It has shifted what was going to be a rout by the Freedom Caucus. I think we can agree. Freedom Caucus entered this election cycle in 2024 with momentum. They gained much more momentum during the election cycle, and bam, as soon as it's over, the guy who was the architect of that, the leader, the organizing force, not only behind their legislative push, but their campaigns, gets taken out. And now not only taken out, but this is being weaponized from a message standpoint against a lot of these Freedom Caucuses members who had nothing to do with it. It has literally turned the debate on its ear. And I think as we see the money starting to flow in to these secretive PACs, like this speakers group that's spending, God knows how much money, just parroting this stuff ad nauseum, Freedom Caucus, a bunch of pedophile protectors. I mean, this is literally all they've got, Dylan. But it's significant, and it's got some people even fleeing the Freedom Caucus. Is that right, from what you're hearing?
I mean, it's difficult at this point to even tell who is in the Freedom Caucus. Like when I'm doing reporting and I want to say they have X number of members, well, unless you go and ask one of them, their website was run by RJ, and apparently they have not paid the domain host to keep this website up.
Oh my God.
Or even you're talking about people who seemingly are Freedom Caucus aligned candidates, but they're not openly running as Freedom Caucus in these upcoming special elections, if you want to get into that.
Yeah. Well, as we look to these upcoming elections, we are seeing, again, we've got 4 special elections as of now in South Carolina. We've got 3 seats in the South Carolina House of Representatives, and we've got 1 race for a state Senate seat. And there are candidates who have filed. You did a big report just this week, Dylan. There are candidates who have filed who are clearly aligned with that Freedom Caucus sort of nucleus, that philosophy, that far right, if you want to call it, or
endorsed by most of the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, so you've got those sets of candidates, but then we've also got candidates filed for these races that are being perceived more as the establishment choices, the picks of powerful House Speaker Merle Smith, who's been waging nonstop war against the Freedom Caucus for the better part of the last 3 years. But Dylan, as you look at how this unfolds in these special elections, these 4 races, Are we going to see a preview of things to come in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, certainly up in House District 21, we're set up for that because we do have somebody who is very Freedom Caucus aligned, Diane Mitchell. She's a former teacher, a mother, a political activist up there who's running with the endorsement of most of the Freedom Caucus. Spoke with her, got a quote from her for a piece about that race, and I asked her, "Are you running? Are you running as a Freedom Caucus candidate? Will you join the Freedom Caucus if elected?" No answer to that question. So it tells you the way the political winds are blowing for that organization right now.
Yeah, we've heard from multiple consultants who've told us they are advising candidates for the legislature not to identify with the Freedom Caucus right now and not to pledge that they would join the organization if they're elected. That's a seismic shift from last election, Dylan.
Yeah, and it's telling that the Freedom Caucus is willing to give their endorsement to people who aren't willing to commit to running to joining the caucus.
Yeah, interesting political play there. But so we see these races unfolding. We see this bigger battle for 2026 where all of the House seats will be up for reelection. And it's worth pointing out the Freedom Caucus isn't the only interest that's going to be targeting some of these incumbent state lawmakers. There's a huge pro-life battle taking place right now at the South Carolina State House. And whatever your view is on abortion in South Carolina, the law currently is a heartbeat law. It was passed and approved in 2023. The Supreme Court upheld it in May of this year. Once that heartbeat is detected in South Carolina, abortion is illegal with the exceptions of rape, incest, and some certain medical conditions. So we've got that on the books. And Dylan, I've been writing about this for a long time, and I told people, whatever your view on abortion, if you hate abortion, that's not good enough for you. If you support abortion, this is a Orwellian incursion on your right. And so neither side is happy about it, and yet people seem surprised the issue keeps popping up.
The issue is, I mean, it's set for a hearing in the Senate Medical Affairs Subcommittee. Do you foresee this actually getting any traction in the House? Because I know that there were big targets put on the House Speaker and the House Judiciary Chair's backs related to this issue. That is the kind of thing that could force them to, I mean, in the way that they view this, they're going to blow half of the time of the upcoming legislative session talking about this because if they do go down the road of trying to pass more abortion legislation, necessarily it will take up a huge amount of the floor time of both the House, the Senate, and a lot of the effort of these crucial committees to move that. Do you think that there is enough political pressure coming in for them to actually go all in and spend another session on abortion?
We are told by our sources in the South Carolina Senate that the bill is dead on arrival in that chamber. And then, in fact, that's one of the reasons it is only now in October, as you mentioned, getting the first hearing after it was introduced way back in February, with plenty of time to advance
So
it.
do you think that they're kind of appeasing the pro-abortion folks here, teasing them along, stringing them along?
Well, they may be, but the problem with that approach, Dylan, is if you look at that's exactly what the House did. That's exactly what Speaker Merle Smith did. They get behind this aggressive pro-life bill, and then they decide not to move it, and then they're surprised when the pro-life people are pissed about it.
Whatever you think about abortion, it's very typical in Colombia, but it's absolute scumbag behavior to go to somebody and promise them, I'm going to move this piece of legislation for you. I'm going to support this for you. And then to not do it or to do it in a way that it's purely symbolic, but has no way of actually passing. And that's just kind of standard operating procedure
They
at
do
the
it all the
State House.
time.
But yeah, it really pisses people off because real people, real voters care about these issues. And they don't understand the absolute lying BS snake nature of these politicians. So when it gets back to your average, GOP attendee, it angers them.
Yeah. No, and rightfully so. Again, like we said, wherever your view lies on this issue, you want your elected official to take a position and then either advocate, for or against it based on.
I would really respect it if Merle and his colleagues came out and said, look, we've put significant time into this issue and we feel that the compromise we reached last time is the best that we're going to get. And I'm sorry for you people who feel that we didn't go far enough. We're not going to advance this legislation because we have X, Y, and Z issues that this state needs to address. And we're going to spend the limited time that we have here in Columbia addressing those.
Yeah.
Instead, they said, oh, yeah, pat you on the back. Yeah, we're going to do that. And then they, stuck the bill in the filing cabinet and forgot where they put it.
Yeah, they played it terribly.
Yeah, and it seems as though the Senate might be walking into the same thing.
Sounds like they could, walking into the same trap. And it'll be interesting to see because that abortion lobby, particularly the Students for Life Action Group, it's important to note this is a grassroots group that took out 3 3 incumbent state senators in the last election cycle helped in large part engineer their electoral defeat. So this is a group that has already made it clear we are coming for some of these House members who are holding this bill up. So that is a huge...
It'd be interesting to see if they could get the scalp of a judiciary chairman.
Weston Newton certainly one of their top targets, and it'll be interesting to see not only whether they're successful making inroads with him, but also challenging Merle Smith directly. And Merle Smith, by the way, folks, go back to FITSNews 2022. We had a big story about him representing an individual who was sued civilly, an abortion provider there in Sumter, and that case has some damning details that Merle Smith is going to have to answer to. And again, I don't fault him. He was representing the client, but look for those Students for Life Action folks to pick up on that Merle Smith lawsuit. But Dylan, we're talking about abortion not philosophically, not in a moral sense, we're talking about it as it relates to this upcoming election cycle. And we've talked about the R.J. May impact, the Freedom Caucus in turmoil. We talked about abortion. I also want to throw another potential influencing factor in the mix. Rom Reddy, Doge SC. This is a guy who is making it very clear that his legislative agenda is something that he's going to weigh in on these races. So you got all these forces starting to move behind the scenes. And then on the other side, in Merle Smith's back pocket, you've got the trial lawyers trying to push their preferred candidates, spending a ton of money. It's just a crazy cycle, man.
It's already heating up, and it feels like we just got finished covering the 2024 election cycle, and now we're spinning back up for the midterms. We maybe had 6 months between, but I think one of the biggest latent issues that we saw last legislative session that will fuel some of this primary spending and fights for who returns to the state house is the tort reform issue, the trial lawyers versus business community war. I think there will be recruitment of candidates specifically for that issue.
Well, we know they like to spend money, and in fact, we've got a big report coming next week on FITSNews about that trial lawyer money. We've been tracking it very closely, so stay on the lookout for that. But Dylan, I also want to talk about this. We've got all these legislative races, and that's where the power is in South Carolina. That's why we focus on them. But there's also a huge governor's race underway, and it has gotten incredibly dirty, incredibly aggressive, incredibly contentious. And it's starting, of course, it's starting with the front runner in the race. We've got Nancy Mace, who this week, after spending months throwing some punches, Nancy Mace finally got hit with a punch. And it was, Dylan, it's a pretty solid one.
Yeah, Lieutenant Governor Pam Evette was blasting Nancy Mace for her anti-Trump positions. This is something I think we're going to see a lot of throughout this race because most of these big candidates have gone in front of cameras and said anti-Trump things, and they both, all of them love to shove each other's faces in it. But I think Pam really scored some massive hits here. You want to check it out?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Who's the real Nancy Mace?
Horrendous rhino known as Crazy Nancy Mace.
A vicious never-Trumper.
Do you believe the president has a future in the Republican Party?
I do not.
The first thing Nancy Mace did when she got to Washington was start attacking Republicans and hold a fundraiser for wacky Liz Cheney.
Never-Trump Nancy fought to censure President Trump, called him dangerous to our nation, and supported Democrat efforts to elect Joe Biden.
Crazy Nancy Mace. She's a terrible person, and she has no idea what she's doing.
Don't be fooled by Never-Trump Nancy.
I mean, that's brutal. And we were at that event. That was in Florence, South Carolina. It was a Trump rally back in 2022.
It was freezing cold.
Freezing balls. We were there.
Both of us probably should have worn more layers.
But it's just, you said it best, Dylan. I think all of these candidates have things that they've said in the past. All of these candidates are wrapping their arms around Trump. I mean, it is just...
They'll spin on him when it's convenient, and then they'll love on him when it's convenient. And Pam, I guess, is arguing that she is the real MAGA representative. Although I don't know that she was really in the arena enough to go against him back when that was a politically convenient thing to do.
Now, Dylan, it was also a big week for Nancy Mace on the legal front. And we've been following this drama ever since February when she made this impassioned, scorched earth speech from the floor of the U.S. House accusing multiple individuals of being sex predators and then calling out State Prosecutor Alan Wilson for failing to protect the victims of these alleged sex predators. It was a huge bombshell. It has spawned multiple civil cases. And in fact, it has spawned a criminal investigation. And one of the individuals Mace referenced has been charged criminally. In fact, he's sitting in the Charleston County Detention Center right now. Now, those charges not directly related to the allegations that Mace has leveled against him, but that investigation's still ongoing. But Dylan, this week, a big development in that case. South Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice John Kittredge designated a judge out of Lawrence, South Carolina, Donald B. Hawker. He is a retired circuit court judge from Lawrence, South Carolina, and he has empowered him to handle all of these civil and criminal cases related to Nancy Mace. And right now it's 5 civil cases and there's 2 criminal cases. Dylan, that number may rise over the course of the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina political consultant Wesley Donahue has been all over X blasting Nancy Mace. He used to work for her, and he works with multiple other people who used to work for her. And he's saying that they all have some very not nice things to say about her, that he would be happy to be sued by her. He apparently anticipates being sued by Nancy Mace. And he's saying that he's looking forward to giving depositions and affidavits and getting all these people on the record.
Oh, my goodness. So he has been, yes, as you said, effusive in his disdain for his former employer, the third-term Congresswoman from Daniel Island, South Carolina. But as that legal saga unfolds, certainly the lawsuit against Wes Donahue, the anticipated lawsuit, is one that we've heard whispers about from credible sources as well. Remains to be seen whether it'll be filed. But that criminal investigation, it is still active and ongoing, according to the State Law Enforcement Division. And clearly, some of the individuals involved in that, as we reported in our coverage of the arrest of Eric Bowman, one of the 4 individuals named by Nancy Mace in the scorched earth speech, clearly there's some substance to at least the allegation that these individuals, one of them anyway, caught on camera, beating up a woman.
I mean, we played it for our audience.
Yeah, that was, the film didn't lie, did it?
No, it's serious and disturbing stuff.
Yeah, and Mace all over the prosecutors down there in the 9th Circuit. They are the ones in charge as of now for that prosecution, because clearly handing it to Alan Wilson, who is her top rival.
Well, but she's been dogging the prosecutors down there too.
So
who's she going to find that she hasn't dogged yet to take it?
Yeah. Well, and it could be that's one of the reasons the court shifted these cases out of Charleston and to get a retired judge that really has nothing to lose. He's not up for re-election again, doesn't really care. But man, we're going to track these things because it is really a nice edge for Nancy Mace with these allegations, Dylan.
Her political career has gone from high-stakes gamble to high-stakes gamble to high-stakes gamble, and they've gone in her favor. It seems as though she's not deviating from that way of doing business as she runs her governor. She's made multiple, all the chips on the table bets, and this looked like it was not going to pan out for her well at all when these cases started being filed, but actually, so far, the legal process has been treating her fairly well, and if the polls are to be believed, and I think that at this point we can say that they're reliable because we've kind of seen the same thing from multiple angles.
Even Wes Donahue has said the polls support Nancy.
Right, even Wes Donahue, who we were just talking about despising Nancy Mace, believes that she'll be the next governor, which it's interesting to set yourself up for such an adversarial relationship with the next governor, but it seems as though these risks are, for the time being, paying off. Now, there's a long time between now and next June when Republican primary voters will go and decide who our next governor will be. But for now, it seems as though these risks are paying off.
That's right. I think the polls would agree with you, Dylan Nolan. And as you mentioned, that Republican primary, for better or worse in South Carolina, it does decide, on a statewide level anyway, who is going to win the race in November, because Democrats have just not been competitive. And as we've pointed out, one of their candidates has had some serious problems of his own in this race, Mullins McLeod.
High-profile attorney Mullins McLeod, of course, famously lost his mind, like literally had a psychotic episode, was picked up by the police. It's unclear whether that was an incident related to drugs or just mental illness, but either way, something that should be disqualifying for a gubernatorial bid, yet he's plowing ahead.
Yeah, well, hey, let me tell you what's disqualifying is not the fact that he lost his marbles in the back of a Charleston police car. It's that ever since doing that, he has basically gaslit everybody into thinking that somehow it never happened, and oh, we're bad people for reporting on it. And oh, by the way, I'm still going to run, and this is all a conspiracy against me. I mean, hell, we were talking about R.J. May earlier with the deep state conspiracy. Mullins McLeod is the one who's got the real tinfoil going, Dylan.
Yeah, and he's running against Dr. Jermaine Johnson, who's a South Carolina legislator who I think I would love to get him to come in the studio.
Oh, we got to get him in.
That would be a great interview.
Yes. Folks, obviously a ton going on here politically in South Carolina. As we mentioned, a slew of cases tied to that South Carolina governor's race, the frontrunner Nancy Mace, and also that federal criminal case against R.J. May, the former leader of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, that could potentially be decisive in numerous elections, which will determine again who controls the state of South Carolina. For the very latest on all of these legal dramas and their political fallout, keep it tuned to FITSNews. So for our final segment on today's show, we're going to have a little blast from the past. We're going to rewind the clock. It's like a throwback segment. We're going to go back to the days of our Congressman scandal. For those of you who didn't follow it, kicked off in 2022 and extended through the last election cycle, and it involved upstate 4th District Congressman William Timmons. Now, Timmons is a Republican, a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. He's a guy who had really cruised to re-election in his prior election cycles, but in 2024, he was nearly ousted by the leader of the Freedom Caucus, Adam Morgan, a very close election. It was Donald Trump's endorsement, which more than likely pushed him across the finish line in that race. But the reason for that close race, Dylan Nolan, was the drama surrounding his personal life, which we covered extensively as it unfolded in what we can only describe as totally chaotic fashion. And the leader of that drama, the guy who was driving it from the very beginning, Ron Rallis, California-born but Greenville, South Carolina-based developer, very wealthy guy, very handsome, good-looking, rich dude. But Ron Rallis was apparently miffed at Timmons for having an affair with his wife. I guess we could,
understandably so.
I mean, if you're going to be mad at a guy, that's a pretty valid reason. But Rallis took his anger to the next level, as we witnessed firsthand, painted a church in the west end of Greenville pink, Pepto-Bismol pink, as a matter of fact, to draw attention to this. Gave us an exclusive interview inside that church laying out his criticism of Congressman Timmons. The story just exploded. It was like reality TV meets politics meets, what the hell? It was just insane, absolutely insane. But the story was rehashed this week on our pages because Ron Rallis, as it turns out, was arrested in Newport Beach, California, involved in a domestic incident there. We do not appear to have charges related to that incident in this case. There was an arrest, however. We have records, bail records. We have a restraining order that was issued in the aftermath which described the incident. And these were materials, ironically, provided to this media outlet by Rallis's own attorneys. Now, the argument here is that Rallis, according to him, according to his lawyers, was the victim. However, we have a female with a broken jaw, allegedly, and we have these police reports which would indicate she was the victim. Also, we have a source who went on the record with us detailing prior allegations against Rallis that would seem to be consistent with the allegations that were attributed to him in California. But it really revived this story, Dylan, and it brought, again, unwanted focus probably for William Timmons, who really has seemed to weather that scandal after his victory, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that he weathered, both this scandal and Morgan. He now has a better relationship with this news outlet as well. But the underlying craziness of, Hurricane Rallis and all that ends up getting sucked in that vortex, I don't think that that's gone anywhere. Between now and then, there have been multiple other crazy but similar Rallis incidents. So this is not entirely unbelievable. And now we're hearing from multiple angles similar things, although it's still not entirely clear. I mean, it's not like we have criminal charges proceeding that we can say, and he's got a court date here. It's allegations. It's things that are kind of secondary on documents, but you're starting to see a picture here.
Well, in fairness, he was arrested, and the bail bond receipt for him being bonded out, they gave him a $50,000 bond, and the receipt clearly referenced a charge in California's penal code, which is their domestic violence statute. So he was clearly arrested at the very least on suspicion of that. Now, we are told that the alleged victim is not cooperating in this case with prosecutors, with police. We tried to reach out to this individual, had no luck.
So is it really dispositive if you're picked up for, I mean, in a lot of domestic violence situations, they're throwing you in the back of the squad car either way.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that he was booked for this and had to go pay bail, that says something.
Well, and Rallis apparently himself was the one who placed the call when this incident happened. It was not the alleged victim, but I wanted to read this real quick. Rallis, this was his response to our reporting, quote, "If there's a story to be told, please be assured it's about me as a victim, but I don't care enough to tell it. My fight years ago was not about my ex-wife. It was about my daughter. The victim is not someone worth a fight, let alone an ounce of my attention." That's Rallis's response to the allegations. Now, what's also interesting about this case, though, Dylan, Rallis has claimed that the victim in this case inflicted the injuries upon herself. But I got a question. Is it, I mean, a broken jaw? This alleged victim is apparently 80-something pounds, capable of inflicting a broken jaw on themselves?
I mean, you would have to be crazy, but yeah, you could totally do that no matter what you weigh with a hammer.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I don't know this alleged victim. I don't know the circumstances, but yeah, I mean, your weight would not preclude you from doing that.
Well, there's a lot more to come on this story, folks. We've talked to several sources who have claimed, again, similar situations involving Ron Ross. We're going to dig into that. And certainly, knowing Ron as we do, we'd like to get him to give his side of the story. He's obviously speaking on the record in some capacity, and we're looking forward to talking with his attorneys. He's also retained another lawyer we know, Dick Harpootlian of Murdaugh fame, not in connection with these criminal charges, mind you, but with some civil matters that are unfolding in the upstate. A big HOA dispute, a property matter. Apparently, Dick Harpootlian has been retained to represent Ron Rallis in that matter, Dylan. But as this criminal story unfolds, and as we look at the allegations that are being raised by these former girlfriends of Ron Rallis, it has brought the spotlight back on that 2022 scandal where William Timmons, shortly after his big primary victory in 2022, admitted in an 18-word statement to this media outlet of his affair with Paula Dyer, a tech executive down in Charleston, South Carolina. Paula Dyer is someone who was married to Ron Rallis, apparently is co-parenting with Ron Rallis. There are rumors that Ron Rallis and Paula Dyer have gotten back together after all this craziness. Apparently those rumors, according to sources familiar with the situation, are not true. I feel like we're talking about a Southern Charm episode here, Dylan.
I'm really surprised the producers of that program haven't put him on the payroll yet.
I mean, seriously, this guy's like T-Rav, but, with...
Is there such a thing as too crazy for them?
I don't know, man, but I think Rallis might push it.
We interviewed Ron, and that was one of the most compelling interviews we've done. But I do ask that if we interview Ron again, we have him come in the studio, because last time it was about 100 degrees in that church that he bought because he apparently didn't pay for the air conditioning to continue to run in that facility. And I remember you were darn near soaked by the end of that 45 minutes.
That was a hot day up in Greenville in 80.
You could see like you're getting sweatier and sweatier throughout the interview.
It was worth it, though. I mean, it was a venue like nothing we've ever been in before.
Truly one of a kind experience.
The Trap Church up there in Greenville, painted it to look like the Trap Museum in Atlanta, by the way. But yeah, this story, obviously Timmons not thrilled that this is back in the news, I'm sure. This is probably not what he ordered. Now, we've also been told that Timmons, who was in a long-standing relationship with Dyer, is no longer in that relationship. Sources close to the situation have told us. Again, Timmons not commenting on the record about this. Paula Dyer not commenting on the record about this. And Ron Ross only in a limited fashion addressing this. But, the political implications here, though, I mean, if this is something that could conceivably bubble up again, if Ron continues to make, news like this with big charges, and it's something we got to keep our eye on, Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, look, if William Timmons was able to weather this successfully while facing a guy like Adam Morgan, who was really giving him both barrels, I don't think that this will preclude him from doing whatever he wants to do in the future. I mean, that was some pretty strong headwinds to run up against and to succeed. You've got to give it to him there. I think that he may have even used the scandal strategically to get out of his marriage that he didn't want to be in and still, remain in his seat. So he might have had his cake and eaten it too there.
Well, Timmons obviously somebody that he doesn't forget his enemies, and he filed a very detailed ethics complaint in the aftermath of his victory. This guy won his race, and then filed an ethics complaint.
Salted the earth after
Yes.
winning, yes.
And that's a very serious complaint, folks. We've reported on it extensively at FITSNews, and not only is Adam Morgan implicated in that, but the Freedom Caucus, several of its members were named in that, and we are told that that report is part of the ongoing House ethics investigation into the Freedom Caucus that has really escalated the tensions there. Freedom Caucus folks call it a witch hunt. Meanwhile, the House GOP refers to it as, hey, credible investigations of, campaign finance abuse. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds, Dylan, and the political ramifications there. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to get Ron back in the studio.
No, as much as I was joking about that, I mean, this is some really serious stuff that he's alleged to have done here.
Yeah. And the other thing that is troubling is that in a situation like this, you hate to hear where there's, and again, I don't want to judge because it, who's in the mind of the alleged victim here, but you hate to hear when they're not cooperating with prosecutors, with law enforcement.
Well, yeah, and the other, I mean, as a reporter, that makes me really nervous to, put my neck out there and say this is what happened in this situation. It's like if you're not willing to go to that level,
that's what the documents are for.
Right?
That's what the
Right.
documents are for. Yeah.
But yeah, you always have to be very careful in situations like this where, I mean, people will weaponize the legal process. They'll weaponize going to the press, and you have to make sure that, okay, I understand there are circumstances where people don't want to go down the road of pressing criminal charges, but that sure makes it easier for us to report on something and know that we can stand up and say, okay, look, the state is bringing charges related to this matter.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that in reviewing the report and looking at this, one of the things that was noted was fear on the part of the alleged victim, and sources who are familiar with that relationship say that there is a fear of retribution from Ron Rallis. But folks, we may have additional reporting on this story in the weeks to come, so please keep it tuned to FITSNews. Obviously, the days of our Congressman saga was a massive story here, one of the biggest political sex scandals we've ever covered. Don't know if this is going to revive it in any huge way, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on as we move forward. But count on FITSNews, again, to keep our audience up to speed on the very latest developments regarding the latest drama surrounding Greenville developer Ron Rallis. All right, folks, that is a wrap for this week's edition. Once again, I want to thank everyone who tuned in this week, and most significantly, all of you who support our work. For those of you who weren't already subscribers to FITSNews, we got a fall into savings campaign that we're running this month to give you a break on that subscription price. But folks, those subscriptions literally empower everything that we do here at FITSNews. These lights, the cameras, all of the in-depth investigative reporting that we do, it's all empowered by you. So please, if you haven't already, consider a subscription to FITSNews.com. And if you already are a subscriber, you can help us out even more by gifting a subscription to a friend, whether it's your spouse, a coworker. Those subscriptions, again, enable all that we do here. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week on The Week in Review.